Streaming live via the internet. Welcome to ISP Radio, your weekly source for ISP-related news, events, and interviews with industry experts. If you deliver internet via fiber optic, wireless, coax, or any other way, you're in the right place. Chat live with us weekly via ispradio.com every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. And now a brief word from our sponsors. Link Technologies, providing ISP consulting, support, and hardware for wireless ISPs. TowerCoverage.com, providing online RF coverage maps. And now your host for ISP Radio, Steve Grabiel and Dennis Burgess.
Welcome to another edition of ISP Radio. I'm your host, Steve Grabiel, broadcasting from Moriarty, New Mexico, and we've got Dennis Burgess producing the show and co-hosting it from St. Louis, Missouri. Dennis, you there?
I am here.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks since we've been back on the show. Unfortunately, Jack couldn't be with us today. He had prior commitments, and we're trying to get him in for next week to talk about the attack on the 5 gig spectrum. What's been going on out here, it's hot. It's really hot, but it's dry, so it's not as miserable as a lot of the other parts of the country, and it's dry. We've got a fire burning not far from here that is going to hopefully be put out soon, but it's pretty dramatic. A lot of my customers are fearful. They're loading up their horse trailers and being evacuated, so that's kind of scary. But what I've been doing out here is we got our directional drill in. It's a Ditch Witch JT 920L, and we took it into Albuquerque to the Ditch Witch dealer, and those guys were really, really helpful for us. They serviced the drill for us, and then they helped us put it all together and let us go out in their backyard and drill for a while. So me and my guys got some test drilling going on, and I hauled it back to the office out in the sticks here in Moriarty, and we're going to start drilling probably Friday some test holes to get more proficient at drilling. It's kind of exciting, this new toy we got. It's very good at what it does, and getting ready to do a fiber optic project for roughly about 40 homes in an air park out in this neck of the woods, and just looking forward to trying a different media of transmission, fiber optic. But other than that, things going pretty smooth on the wireless front. We upgraded yesterday a relay that was pretty darn old, put a Microtech OmniTech on it, and are converting people from 2.4 to 5 gig on that to ease some congestion. But other than that, just been kind of busy. How about you, Dennis? What's going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, definitely been busy. Lots of projects, lots of IPv6 going on, which is always a really good thing. So that's always really good. I enjoy those. Those projects are always fun, if you know what I mean. The rest of the stuff, we've been doing, like I said, a lot of IPv6. We've had a lot of extra stuff, go on. As far as lots of new products, Microtech's coming out with new products, all this kind of good stuff. So all that's a really really great thing. As you say, hot. It's really, really hot. Thankfully, our building is half underground. So to be honest with you, it's been pretty nice and cool inside anyway. So lots of good stuff on that. I guess we have to get into our wonderful news, because that's really kind of the big thing that's going on, if you know what I'm saying.
Let me ask you something real quick. You mentioned about IPv6.
Yeah.
It's not really a conversion. It's overlaying IPv6 on top of your IPv4. Is that correct?
It's what we call dual stack. And
right.
The easiest way to describe that is you're running two network protocols simultaneously. Each one has absolutely nothing to do with the other. They don't talk to each other. It's two completely separate systems, if that makes sense.
Two completely autonomous systems that never touch each other, right?
Correct. There is things about it that work and doesn't work, but typically, yes, you're going to run dual stack. And I've seen some people stating that they're going to start running IPv6 only stacks where they're removing v4. And while I think that, hey, more power to you, I don't think it's something that most people are going to be doing. I think they're probably maybe going a little too far in that particular case. But most ISPs, I believe, are going to probably run dual stack, and the dual stack is probably the easiest way to run IPv6. And while there are some gotchas and there are some definitely deployment guides out there, there's tons of resources online. You definitely need to look at what's going on, and you should be deploying it already.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, we've done networks from 90 plus sites to who knows how many sites, and V6 is not horrible to deploy. There's definitely some really good things and easy ways to deploy it. You just have to go through that and do your due diligence and deploy it.
Right.
So, my definite recommendation is this: is if you haven't started it, you should be right away.
Right, and we've had Aaron on the radio show, and they've told us that they're pretty much handing out IPv6 like candy, so it's not a big deal to
there's lots of IPv6 out there. That's easy.
Yeah.
So, and most of your major websites are going to be V6 enabled. They're going to have all that good stuff already in there. So, I would highly doubt that most of what you're going to see out there right now, YouTube, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, all those types of things are all V6 enabled already, Netflix, etc. So while you are going to be running dual stack for probably a good long time, we are running V6. We do have some issues with V6, and actually I should rephrase that. It's not really an issue. It is a, again, deployment scenario in which we have some challenges in the deployment. And specifically, we get a lot of WISPs that run hotspot systems. And those hotspot systems really just are not compatible with V6. Now, let me there are ways to make it work, but it's not really slick or easy. Nor is that V6 stuff really set up for that yet. So we're not seeing an easy deployment on there, but most of what I see people doing, especially, is PPOE. I was just working on a PPOE server that had like 1,800 sessions on it, and that's a really good example of deploying. They can deploy IPv6 very, very quickly in a PPOE session scenario. So there are some gotchas, but I don't think there's anything too horrible about it.
Mm-hmm. So you want to get into the news that you've heard recently?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So what's recently happened? Let's toss this back over here to me. Let me go find this real quick. What's recently happened? We had Mr. Steve Curran, and he's the FCC legal counsel with WISPA, on the show previously. And I'm hoping if we don't get Jack, we have tons of people working on scheduling, but it just hasn't all panned out yet. But hopefully we'll get Mr. Steve Curran online, maybe hopefully next week or the week after, to really talk about this. But this is the open internet decision. For most of you, you may have remembered there's a older episode that we were talking with Steve about, and this is basically the oral arguments, is I think what the title of that episode was. And what these were oral arguments that was given to the United States Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia, specifically relating to the FCC's trying to enforce Title II and net neutrality on ISPs, small operators, etc. Now, this was a court case. This was the court case to say, hey, they do not have the right, in part or whole, etc., yada yada. That's basically what they were trying to do. They're trying to say, did the FCC overstep their bounds? Did they not? Did the FCC do this, do that? Can they do this? Is there parts that are correct, parts that are not correct, etc.? So this past week, and I'm just going to look here, it looks like on Tuesday, so yesterday, the United States Courts of Appeals, again for the District of Columbia, came back with their decision. And I'm going to give you the short and sweet, and this is: the appeals were denied and the FCC rules stand. So there's a big, long document that is publicly available. Anybody can get to it. I'm going to toss that up on the screen here. I don't even remember. It's like 184 pages. I mean, absolutely insane. But can only like use a tenth of the page, it looks like. And they go into tons and tons and tons of information that's probably way beyond what most people are probably going to work for. But the big point of this is that the FCC has withstood this particular Court of Appeals, and the net neutrality arguments are saying that the FCC has the requirement for that, and or they can do this, and that this is legal. So the question then comes down to, what do we really need to do with this? What is the next process? Why is this important? Is also probably one of those things. So the very first question I asked, and again, I'm hoping that we'll probably get Steve online at some point in time in the future, but I actually asked Mr. Steve Cran from Lehrman Center, again, the WISPA FCC legal counsel, a couple questions that I kind of wanted to give everybody some answers to. So the very first thing is, with this Court of Appeals basically stating no, the FCC rules stand, what's the next step? How do we oppose Title II regulation for, quote, WISPA, or for any operator that is an internet operator that now falls underneath the Title II regulation, or has been falling underneath the Title II regulation? First off, as far as WISPA is concerned, there's really a couple options, and they haven't, of course, WISPA has not made any decisions yet. We can, or WISPA can, request a rehearing, and I'm going to really mangle this word, but in blanc, B-A-N-K, or I'm sorry, B-A-N-C, and that basically just means that all the D.C. Circuit Court judges within 45 days, so we can have a rehearing of that, or we can appeal to the Supreme Court within 90 days. So, of course, WISPA is going to be exploring those options. There's going to be lots of discussion and all this. WISPA is definitely, I'm sure, is well versed in this, and will give a lot of information. But so there are some options that we're still going down, or WISPA is still going down. But the big thing here is that a Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia did say that the appeal for net neutrality is not there, that no, we cannot appeal it, and go from there. Now, it's very difficult, and again, this is a quote from Mr. Curran. I asked him a question here. Can you give me some very specific things that, if a WISP or of other small operator may be required to change to fit into the Title II regulation? And unfortunately, as Mr. Curran will say, and I'm just going to read this verbatim so that everybody hears it, Mr. Curran responded, that is a very difficult question to do on a general basis, given the untested nature of the FCC's rules and the vague language that remains. The best advice is to be reasonable and to make sure that any throttling is for reasonable network management and is disclosed to customers in an open internet disclosure statement and a consumer broadband disclosure. This is what we call the nutrition label. So that is his words verbatim. The problem, or one of the problems we have with this Title II regulation, is that it's all brand new. So a lot of the terminology that we have inside that is very, very vague. And because of that, we don't really know what it means. And it sounds horrible to say that, but literally we don't. We don't really know to what extent those items will be enforced or what it actually means. So at some point in time, there will be probably some court cases. There will probably be some rulings, and that will make the information from the FCC more clear, or clearer anyway. So keep that in mind. I also asked a couple other questions, or one other question. I'm just going to read this because, again, Mr. Cran's time is, he's been very busy, so we didn't want to get him on, but hopefully we'll get him on in a week or two. The last question I asked him was, what are some of the expenses a small operator with, say, less than 500 users would have to incur, as well as what is expected to cost of those changes if or going through the Title II. Again, I'm going to read this verbatim just so everybody has it. Mr. Steve Cran, again from Lehrman Center, specifically said, the costs are very hard to document because they involve compliance and litigation risk. A small WISP should definitely be in compliance with the consumer disclosure requirements, which is something an experienced lawyer can, of course, assist in preparing. WISPs also should have accurate terms and conditions and acceptable use policies and privacy policies. Because business practices and network capabilities are different for each WISP and to each network, it is difficult to estimate the actual cost. But a range of $2,500 to $7,500 is a decent estimate for a WISP with 500 customers in a single network. Now, I don't know what that range completely covers, and there has been some discussion on some lists that say that becoming a Title II also carries some technical requirements. I heard one person say that, hey, as a Title II operator now, I have to have any of my facilities that serve multiple customers have to have at least 8 hours of backup, which may be difficult for small repeaters, things like that, or make them unaffordable. I can't sit there and tell you that. I don't know. This is just scuttlebutt that was on some of the lists. So you need to make sure that you get with your lawyer, as well as probably a telecom lawyer now that you are a telecom. Keep that in mind. You're a Title II operator. That you may want to get with them to find out exactly what you need to do to ensure that compliance. But the big things definitely are terms and conditions, acceptable use, and privacy policies. I think those are pretty well standardized, and for you anyway, you should have those. But now we have the network management disclosure, the open internet disclosure statement, as well as the consumer broadband disclosure, which is the nutrition label coming up. So those are definitely coming out, and you probably want to take a look at those in the near future if you have not done so, and your lawyer can probably help you with that, of course. So that is the big skinny, the long and skinny of it for this particular branch. And there hasn't been made any decisions on what WISPA's position will be going forward, etc. So we will have to.
It just launched yesterday.
Yeah, I mean it just came out yesterday, so it'll be a little bit before we get all that information, which is fine, you know.
So it sounds like we just have to add a few more, like you said, nutritional value statements on our website, then we're in compliance, if you will, and then the real burden comes down the road when they start pouring out their wrath on the ISPs.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, they look at this as all this is going to do. It's not really protecting the consumer. It's going to make smaller operations, especially smaller operations. This is kind of the big thing, is a small operation that is bringing broadband into an area that is well underserved. You know, I look at it this way. You know, how many of WISPA operators or other even operators have, say, a micro pop that has less than 10 subs on it? If you take that number and you go, hey, we have to add $500 worth of equipment to every one of these. We have to have a generator. We have to have significant batteries. We have to have a big case. We have a big enclosure. All this kind of stuff. We have to have 24-hour access to that. Maybe a requirement. Again, these are some of the questions that eventually we will need to have answered to understand what we have to do as a Title II operator to manage those facility-based systems and to ensure that we have to follow those rules correctly. You know, when do you have to report an outage? You know, if you have 3 people off that micropop and that micropop loses power, do you have to report that? Do you not? What's the fees if you don't report it and somebody else and one of your users say, hey, I didn't have internet for 4 hours. I had power at my house because I have a backup generator, but I didn't have internet. I don't know. Again, these are all questions, and part of a lot of the open internet stuff is really vague, so we don't even know what they really need. All we can do is make an assumption, maybe an educated one, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good assumption, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this is all new ground for this industry.
Well, note it's new ground for this industry, plus it's not really defined.
Right.
It'd be different if there was really clear practices. But as Mr. Curran said, the best advice is to be, I'm going to use these air quotes. Let's see if I can get them in on my monitor. Air quotes, there it is. Reasonable. What is reasonable? Well, one man's reasonable is probably another person's non-reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
So the big thing is you're going to have to make that argument, or you need to be able to reasonably justify it, and hopefully your reasonable agrees with the FCC later on. You know, and that's what we're going to see. We're seeing tons of FCC complaints now on internet circuits, and eventually we're going to get to the point where the FCC is going to be investigating some of those, and at some point in time, the FCC is going to go, okay, why did this occur, and was it reasonable or not? And someone's going to make that determination, and we're going to see these, FCC rulings basically that will really dictate and really take a broad scope that is the current open internet order and net neutrality stuff, and bring it down into here's actually what it means. But the problem is, for those operators that think they're being reasonable, that's up to the FCC to decide later. That's what really sucks.
Right, and I mean the consumer should look at it from this standpoint. Yes, they can complain to the FCC and escalate this, but just like you said, a pop with 10 subscribers on it, you get one complaint and the FCC comes down and hammer it. In my case, FCC wants to come down and hammer on me because this one guy's complaining. I just pulled the tower down. I don't need the business.
Yeah, I mean and so how is that? And that goes back to this whole: does it benefit the consumers? And while the answer is in general, yeah, it's a good ideal, and there are definitely very specific things that there are definitely very specific things that we can do, but especially for the smaller operators, we really see that these things are, one, a burden. They are going to have less. We're going to have less innovation. We're going to have less creativity on, hey, let's put up this pop site to get these extra 10 people that don't have internet. Why? Yeah. Because it's inexpensive and we can do it. But whenever our requirements jump up to be, the minimum pop site is going to be $3,000 worth of equipment versus $300 maybe. I'm just going to use that as an example. That all of a sudden may price that pop out of pricing range, or it's going to lead to increases in pricing.
Mm-hmm.
So it is what it is, and that's all we can do. But hopefully we'll in the next few weeks, my hopeful goal is that we're going to really get some really good discussion out there, some open discussion on what we need to do to be compliant, etc. And hopefully we can bring that information back here to the show, as well as, again, get Mr. Cran on so that we can really get some more information. I believe Alex Phillips, which is the president of WISP, I believe he wants to get online so that he can also talk to this. Is this a win or a loss? That's not really a good way of looking at it, because it's just another step, and that's all it is. We have another step. We continue on. So go from there.
Well, these guys probably need a couple of weeks to digest the 184 pages of gobbledygook that means nothing to an ISP other than...
I started reading it, and I kind of went, I'm not going to read this. So
rather shove a stick in your eye, right?
Yeah, well, it's hard to read. It's not the easiest thing to read in the world, and I'm sure there's probably some really good points, and there's probably some for someone like Mr. Curran or the WISPA FCC chair, the people that are going to be heavy into this. Reading all that is probably really good, because it gives us insight into what the judges as well as the FCC might see. You know what I'm saying? Looking from that point of view. But otherwise, I don't need to read it all.
Right. That's why Alex gets paid all this great money that he gets paid from WISPA. He's a volunteer.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah. So at any which rate, I guess the last thing I got for today, it's a pretty short session, is you know, we were talking about our sites and our sponsors at the show here, and we actually got a new sponsor, a company called Hotspot Network Manager. I don't even know if their banner is up on the site yet, but for those of you that are looking for a fairly high-end but low-cost hotspot system, obviously we have the user manager from Microtech, which is pretty much free. It does work, but if you're looking for a really, really slick system that does a lot of stuff, that would be that Hotspot Network Manager system. Lots of really good stuff. A little bit more startup cost, but the big thing in this is you have social management. You can run multiple hotspots completely separate. So the example being is you can run one hotspot network manager, but you can resell a whole bunch of services. And I'm going to use a customer that I know, and I won't mention his name. But what he ended up doing is he ended up providing wireless access to a strip mall. And the strip mall had 2 bars and a restaurant, 1 bar, 1 restaurant, and the other one is a coffee shop. And they're all right next to each other. So what he ended up doing is he ended up coming in and putting in 2 access points between all 3 of these and covered everything. And then he went to them and said, hey, do you want to give free internet? And what he charges each one for is free internet on their SSID, so much speed, etc. And he uses the network manager to control all that. So he uses 2 pieces of hardware. He has 3 completely separate hotspots, completely different logos, completely different backgrounds, splash pages, etc. One of them, they actually have a passcode that they have to enter. The restaurant, they want you to take a survey to get free internet. So was the food good? Was the service good? That type of stuff. Have you been here before? Things like that. And the other one, it's just completely free, but I believe they also asked to do some social logins. So lots of options with that. Gesundheit.
Thanks.
Lots of options with that. I'm just going to give you for our listeners here, I'm just going to give you a little preview of one of the splash pages that was created for a local dealership. Your pricing is going to start around, say, $1,200 to $1,500 for the initial. But then after that, it's just how many networks you need, and each network can be completely different. If you need, we're getting a lot of RV parks, that type of stuff as well. And those parks are, what's real nice is they charge for internet. Well, you can take 6 different parks, have 6 different splash pages, have 6 different billing systems, 6 different packages on each one of them, completely different packages, completely different speeds, and the money can go to 6 different places. In other words, you can have different authorized .net accounts, different PayPal accounts, etc. You can also do voucher systems as well. And all those can be completely different, all on one system. And while that doesn't, in some cases, may be really good or really bad for you, it's really the big thing here is that it's a really big thing for you to be able to get that information and be able to deploy it. So it's not a singular tool, if that makes sense. It is something that you can deploy and keep deploying and keep deploying. And the fees for your network upgrades and things like that are relatively inexpensive. And I see a lot of our users, a lot of our customers, that what they're doing with it is they're grabbing it and they're deploying it onto some of their POPs, and then they sell it as a value add to hotels and other services, and they charge monthly for that. So they are charging more for that than the initial cost over the course of a year. So it's just like anything else. It's an ROI that you have to put together. But the example being is that ROI is hopefully pretty good for you. At least that's what we hope for.
What platform does this run on?
So the current platform is a total brain lapse here. It is a virtual appliance. So the easiest way is if you have a virtual infrastructure already, you can run it on that. It is designed for ESXi or VMware. But you don't actually have that. We actually have a smaller group They have a single site. They're a very busy campground basically, and what they do is they actually have a workstation set up with VM Player, and that's it. They just have a computer that runs the system off that VM Player. They do backups every often and such, so they always have backups. But that's all they needed. So that's what they did. There are, of course, virtualized options in the cloud for you. You can use vSphere Air or other hosting platforms. Link Technologies, of course, can host that as well for you. But you don't have to do that. And if you don't have virtualized infrastructure, just a computer will run it. It needs a little setup, but just a workstation will run it. It's not like you're unless you're really using a whole bunch, it's not like it requires a whole lot of resources either.
Well, I guess my question is, what kind of wireless infrastructure does this run across? I mean, I'm a Microtech shop. Could I easily deploy this across a Microtech network?
That's actually a really good question. So the answer to that is it is specifically designed with Microtech in mind to begin with. So it is very easy to deploy on a Microtech-based hotspot. However, it does have the WISP-R protocols, so you can deploy it across things like Ruckus. I believe there's a Unify system in there, as well as you can also deploy it across the Cisco, the Meraki system as well. So completely all integrated with all those. So if you have a Ruckus system with a Ruckus controller with no Microtech for whatever reason, yes, you can deploy it inside that Ruckus system with that Ruckus controller if you wish to as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it does support all that. It does support both the Ruckus Cloud and a cloud controller, as well as a standalone controller as well. So a lot of options. How's that? And the configuration, there's so many options in the configuration system that almost gets to the point that it's a little maybe not complicated, but I always go back and say it's this way. If you ever use Microtech, you have this wonderful thing that Microtech does everything, and that's probably one of the biggest problems. It does everything. This system here is the exact thing for the hotspot world. It does everything in the hotspot world. That's its best thing, but it also, the worst thing about it is it does everything. So there's a lot of things that you can do. You can do video intros. You can do, hey, I want you to show this big logo or this big sale when they first get there. Lots and lots and lots of stats can be derived from this system. I'll toss it back up there. Everything from how much money have you made, how many free users, how many hours of connection, daily sales, how much traffic, new social users, surveys, click-throughs, number of impressions. There is also a ad module that you can get to do ad campaigns if you wish to. I know one customer that they have a few hotels, and then they have their salesperson call around those hotels for pizza places that deliver pizza, Chinese, and pasta. I think are their big ones. And some of those places pay $300 a month for an ad on the hotel's page. And what they do is they charge the hotel for internet. And then the hotspot management is free for the hotel, but they get to sell ads, up to 3 ads, on the hotel's hotspot system. So I know some of those sites, they have 2 or 3 or 4 local, both pizzerias, Chinese places that deliver to the hotel, that they sell ads to on a reoccurring monthly basis, and they make more probably on that than the actual internet access, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, again, this is a value add product. That's what most hotspots are for wireless operators. So you just have to go through there and go see what you want to do.
And is this a product that Link Technologies supports?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So Link Technologies, we do support. There is free email support from the manufacturer, but they are based in, or the developer, they are based in Europe, so it does take a little bit longer. But just like Microtech, Link Technologies also has experienced engineers that we can, of course, help you with deployment, all that kind of good stuff if needed. So we've talked about it before, but now they're the sponsor, so we'll have to keep going on that.
Well, we appreciate their sponsorship. Hey, quick question on news. Two things. Forums 477. Do you have any idea when that's coming up?
Form 477 is October 1st is the due date, I believe.
Okay, October. So it's twice a year.
Yeah, it's twice. It is twice a year, but I believe
Okay.
October. I don't quote me on that, but I believe October 1st is the due date for that.
And then my last question for the folks out there: Wispalooza registration's open now, and it's cheap, right?
I
Or
believe
relatively
it is
cheap.
still. Let me check. I just want to check here. So obviously, Wispapalooza is coming up. Everybody needs to go to that. The board nomination is closed, so I know there's some review for nominees. But keep in mind, you will probably be getting your votes here soon, or your emails to vote. So make sure you do that. Click here to register. Sorry, I had to click the right button, right? But I'm just trying to see the pricing here because I want to make sure. Keep in mind there is the Fiber Weekend as well. So we have the Fiber Weekend, October 11th through the 13th is the actual Wispapalooza. Attendees. No. Again, you have to be able to click the right button, Dennis. Yeah, end of the month. You only have 2 more weeks to get it at the lowest price. At the beginning of July, the fee goes up $100 to register your conference pass. So, register if you haven't done so. Book your room, etc.
I'll get off the show and do that today.
There you go.
Well, got anything else, Dennis? A pretty good show talking about what we've got coming down the pike. We'll definitely reach out to Stephen, and we'll be scurrying around to get some more value-added interviewees to talk with. But Steve is definitely one that we want to get, and it's good that it got released yesterday, and they'll have a while to digest the nonsense that came forth. But hopefully we'll get Steve here soon. If you got anything else, Dennis, we could wrap the show up.
No, I think we're really good here. And
again, we want to thank our new show sponsor. We appreciate the sponsorship.
Yeah, I think we're going to be really good on that, and all we can do is keep going, moving forward here. So we will wrap up the show, and we look forward to seeing everybody next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to ISP Radio. We hope you've gained new insights and additional wisdom. Remember to visit our show sponsors via the links on ispradio.com. If you're interested in becoming a show sponsor, contact us at sales@ispradio.com. Now go out there and push those packets as fast as you can. Good luck and Godspeed.